Hello, friends. Welcome to First Reading, the Old Testament, well, sort of Old Testament, lectionary podcast for preachers everywhere. I'm Tim McNinch. I teach Hebrew Bible at Christian Theological Seminary.
And I'm Rachel Wren. I am an assistant professor of biblical studies at Trinity Lutheran Seminary at Capital University. We're going to lose our Old Testament card if we keep this up.
I know.
Folks, we are doing a Revelation series for the season of Easter, and we're calling it Hebrew Bible Readers Read Revelation. We're not actually calling it that, but that's what we're doing. We are trained Hebrew Bible scholars, and we're going to read Revelation. So this is for May 4th. Tim, may the 4th be with you.
And also with you.
Thank you. And we have the book of Revelation, chapter 5, verses 11 through 14. So, Tim, what did you do with this one?
Not a whole lot, but we'll have a conversation about it anyway. Just to kind of set us in where we are in the book of Revelation. Rachel, last week you gave us some introduction to Revelation as a kind of apocalyptic literature, meaning that it's a kind of window into an alternate reality that speaks something meaningful to a community that's experienced trauma and are trying to figure out what sense they can make of it.
Yeah.
This is a particular type of literature that found its heyday in the kind of Second Temple time. And by the time we get to the book of Revelation in the first century or late first century, this is kind of where people would have been familiar with the conventions of this type of literature and would have known basically how to read it. And so they would be expecting the kind of fantastic imagery that we find here, the dualisms of good and evil, which seem to have no nuance whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right? And the picture of divine power and resolution that comes to the suffering that's depicted.
Yeah. Craig Kester was the professor I took the book of Revelation class from when I was in seminary, and his work still informs everything I do on Revelation. He argues that the book revolves around two basic mysteries or questions asked by everybody everywhere, which is the problem of evil
Mm-hmm.
and the nature of hope. And what I like so much about the way he deals with this is he said what Revelation does is it forces us to face the fact that these two questions are not so much problems to be solved as mysteries to be explored.
Mm.
And I don't think we do a good job in Christianity of mystery. Like, we don't have a
Yeah.
good we have a strong mystic tradition, but not in really Western Christianity today. We like answers. We like problems that are then solved.
Right, right.
So inviting people in this sermon series to explore the mysteries that Revelation offers might be a helpful way to give people kind of permission to be uncomfortable in the midst of all this.
Yeah, I find that really helpful because to me, what it makes me think of is the way that I'm not really an expert in apocalyptic literature, but I do feel a little more at home in, say, ancient Hebrew poetry.
Yeah.
But there's a similarity there of kind of soaking in the imagery and what the text evokes in you
Mm-hmm.
that I think crosses the boundary between, typical biblical poetry and the kind of specialized literature that apocalyptic is. There's
Yeah.
a kind of sitting with, wrestling with the unknowable and the mystery that we encounter in a text like this.
No, absolutely.
So, Rachel, you got us into the book of Revelation last week with some of the first chapter,
Mm-hmm.
where we're introduced to this seer named John who is bringing a message, a divinely conveyed message to these 7 cities in Western Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And chapters 2 and 3 in Revelation are basically the content of those particular messages to each of those 7 Christian communities in those cities.
Yeah.
And then the story shifts there to this amazing image of a heavenly throne room
Mm-hmm.
where there's these weird beings
Yeah.
described in weird ways,
Yeah.
setting up some of the mystery of
Yeah.
what the divine realm may be like. And again, this is not
Yeah.
looking into the future. This is peeling back to
Yeah.
see an alternative world where God's power is just on display
Yeah.
and is mediated through some of the awesomeness of these
Yeah.
strange creatures.
Yeah, if you wanna do a fun, like, ongoing children's sermon with this preachers, you could invite students up or invite kids up to draw pictures of heaven, but then, like, read the Revelation text and have them start to include that, and so with them at those young age, start to explore, like, what are things that are awful like, awesome that might be in heaven, and what are things that are mysterious that might be in heaven, and help your congregation kind of enter it in that sort of non-threatening way as well.
Yeah, there's all sorts of memes that are out there too for, like, what biblical angels actually look like, that sort
Yeah,
of
right.
thing. There's always
Yeah.
lots of eyes,
Yep.
lots. Yeah,
Lots of
anyway,
wings.
the end of chapter 4 in Revelation takes us through to this scene of praise of the Holy One, where these powerful creatures at the four corners of heaven are all, like, in harmony, extolling the worth
Mhm,
of the Holy One. And then chapter 5 pivots,
mhm.
and all of a sudden, the one who's seated on the throne reveals that there's this document, this
Yeah.
scroll,
Hmm.
and it is sealed up with 7 seals. The number 7 is really important in
Mhm.
Revelation and in apocalyptic literature as a kind of symbolic number of, like, perfect complete. So this is, like, really closed. It's got seven seals, and, the problem is that, there's no one in creation who's worthy to
Yeah.
open this document up and let the contents, which are kind of like God's pronouncements of what's gonna happen,
Mhm,
unfold in history. And
mhm.
and so that problem is resolved when all of a sudden appears a lamb
Yeah.
who looks as if it's been slain,
Mhm,
and it turns out that this is the one who is worthy to open the seals of the scroll and
mhm.
to supervise, that is,
Yeah.
the unfolding of God's work in history.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think here as Hebrew Bible scholars, we hear the word lamb and our antenna go up because there are a couple of really important lamb images, especially slain lamb images in the Hebrew Bible. One of the main ones we usually go to is Leviticus, where we talk about the atonement, the lamb who is killed or slaughtered to atone for sins. But that's not the only lamb who is killed. There's also the Exodus story, the lamb who is killed, whose blood is put above the lintel of the doorway. And that
Mhm.
has nothing to do with atonement.
Right.
The Israelites at that point are enslaved and they need liberation. When you look at the Gospel of John, it's actually like because if we're in Revelation, we're kind of in the Johannine community. So John, first, second, and third John, and then the Revelation, the idea from scholarship is that they all came out of a similar community that was dealing
Mm.
with similar things. So in the Gospel of John, the lamb imagery is not atonement, it is that Exodus imagery. So kind of fun to play with here. Is the slain lamb imagery talking about sin, or is it talking about that liberation from kind of just the brokenness of and oppression of the world?
And even though this introduction of the slaughtered lamb is not a part of the assigned
Yeah.
lectionary reading, you sort of need it
Yeah.
for the part that is in the lectionary. And, the other thing that I would add to this mysterious image of the slaughtered lamb is that there's so much in Revelation and in this particular part of the book that draws upon the imagery of the book of Isaiah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And in Isaiah, you
Mhm.
have not exactly pictured as a lamb, but you have a suffering servant,
Yeah.
one who has experienced a kind of slaughter, a beating down and a loss of life, and yet that suffering servant is the one who bears God's authority
Yeah.
and helps to unfold what God's doing in the world. And so I think there's probably something going on there as well. The thing that this image makes me think of is, on the one hand, it's quite transparently a reference to Jesus
Yeah.
as the the slaughtered lamb, who is the one with authority to open the scroll of God's pronouncements in the world and to rule and reign as God's agent. So that is pretty transparent in the text. But because he's pictured as a slaughtered lamb, and because of the resonance between that and the suffering servant and these other lamb images, there's a sense here that what God is doing in the world, what God is doing in the unfolding of history, comes through those who do not appear to have all of the power,
Mhm.
all of the privilege, all of the
Yeah,
wealth,
yeah.
all
Mhm,
of the might, but
mhm,
it is surprisingly in those who have themselves been oppressed and
yeah,
injured and even slaughtered,
mm,
and that those are the people in the communities through whom God is doing what God is doing in the world.
yeah, yeah,
And so as we sit
yeah,
in the mystery of the trauma of the communities in the ancient world that were receiving these
yeah,
texts, as we think through connections to our own world, it's those who have been at the bottom
mhm.
who end up being the ones to bear God's work in the world.
Yeah. I think that's so well said, Tim. Anytime you're in the book of Revelation, you should expect all of your expectations to be turned upside down. It's sort of like a giant living, breathing parable.
Mhm.
You go to verse 14, and the four living creatures said, Amen. Well, this is in response to every creature in heaven and earth saying, blessing and honor and glory and might to the Lamb. And the elders fell down and worshiped. This all sounds really bizarre, but just hold with what you said there for a minute, Tim, that who are the elders worshiping? They're worshiping a lamb who has been slain. There's nothing in the Greco-Roman understanding of an honor and shame society that should give honor to something that has
Right.
been killed. There and the what the elders represent here are sort of the power brokers of the community. So this is a challenge to people who think they're complacent in their power, their earthly power that they have. They're saying, no, actually, when you peel that back, what you see is the ones who you don't expect to have the power are the ones that are actually worthy of blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. So that
Mhm.
image of peeling it back and then helping us to sort of peel away from our own perception of the world, what are we misperceiving as power that is actually not? And what are the places that we are being called to fall on our knees and say blessing and honor and glory and might? So,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And so I would recommend along those lines, preachers, to really focus in verse 12, which
mhm.
which is where the myriads and thousands and all the creatures and the elders are singing, "Worthy is the lamb
Yeah,
that was slaughtered to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing."
yeah.
Which is a beautiful sort of, like, poetic device to just pile on.
Yeah,
It's not just to worthy to receive power and wealth and
yeah,
wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing, so it's got this
yeah,
cumulative force, kind
yeah.
of poetic force behind it, but it's also, exactly 7 blessings.
Oh, look at you.
So
That's
so
awesome.
the author of this is also using the symbolism of
Yeah.
numbers, just as there are 7 seals of God's perfect unfolding of history, so for this lamb who is worthy, but worthy in
Mhm.
what kind of way? In a
Yes,
sevenfold way,
yes.
to be God's agent. He's the perfect representative of
Mhm.
God because there's 7 blessings for them.
Mhm. And so what does power look like in the upside down world of this perfect slaughtered lamb? What does wealth look like? What does true wisdom look like? I mean, I think you could really draw out some neat sermon with those words and in talking about sort of the upside down reality of revelation. And so what do we need to peel away from our way of perceiving the world when it comes to power, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to might and all that sort of thing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think this little snippet of poetry here in this song is in line with so much that's
Yeah.
in the rest of the New Testament, but also in the Hebrew Bible. I've
Yep.
spent a lot of time in First Samuel, and Hannah's song
Yeah.
comes to mind here of, the lowly that are lifted up,
Yep.
and the ones who are, on the trash pile being raised up to the seats of the princes.
Hmm.
That's the sort of upside down work that
Yeah.
God's reality does, if we would, again, peel it back and get
Yeah.
that glimpse into the revelation of what is really real.
Mm. And to my mind, that's so much richer than talking about the end of the world. Like, this is the whole point of Revelation is so that we see the world as God sees it.
Mhm,
And what greater gift could life give us than to see the beloved nature of the world and the goodness of the world the way God sees it? So I
mhm,
think there's a lot there.
for sure. Now the book doesn't stop there.
No, no, it does
We
not.
actually get those seals opened, and, some crazy stuff happens.
Yep, we get some horsemen, we get all sorts of fun things. But for that, preachers, you're going to have to stay tuned.
That's right.
Well, thanks, Tim, for your great work this week and for drawing us into the peeling back that Revelation is doing in our lives.
Sure thing.
Preachers, we hope you found some good stuff here. Again, if you are doing this, if you're doing Apocalypse Now, then please let us know so we can have a conversation about what's working well, what came up for you, what's resonating with your people, especially. You can find us at First Reading Podcast at podcast. Oh, I'm trying to put Minnesota's coming out there.
Oh,
First
boy.
Reading Podcast at gmail.com is our email, or you can get us on our website, firstreadingpodcast.com. Should I just do the rest of the outro like that?
Wow.
Preachers, please send us to a friend, send us to a colleague, send us to just somebody you know who you think would benefit from this. Thanks to all of you for listening. I'm Rachel Wren.
I'm Tim McNinch. Enjoy the apocalypse.